The firewall needs a little bit of cleanup. A sanding stick will take care of it. There's just a tiny bit of interference where the firewall meets the lower chassis piece. Using a hobby knife, I'll trim away a small bit of material. It doesn't need much removed, but this will make a big difference in how well the firewall fits. And if you're using a new blade, be careful. Much better, now the firewall sits flat against the chassis piece. These two electronic boxes on the rear bulkhead can be difficult to paint once the chassis is assembled. I like to use a photo etch razor saw to remove them. Make sure to hang on to those, they'll be cleaned up and painted and added later. A quick cleanup with a sanding stick, and this piece is ready for further assembly. With all these pieces of the rear clip cleaned up, we can begin assembling it now. A little more glue is applied to the insides to make sure we've got a strong bond. At this point, a few minor adjustments can be made before the glue finally cures. This rear chassis piece just needs a little bit of cleanup. A few swipes with a hobby knife will take care of any mold lines. It's important to make sure this piece fully seats against the rear bulkhead. I'm constantly putting pressure on each joint as I glue them to make sure everything stays square. If anything's out of alignment here, it will throw everything off, so make sure you spend some time to make sure everything is lined up properly. Next, we'll glue the firewall to the lower chassis piece. Make sure this is at a 90-degree angle. Here we'll drop it on the chassis pan to make sure everything fits properly. Once the glue is cured on the bulkhead, we can add the tail section. Make sure it hits all 4 spots and everything is square and straight. I'm using pressure with my left hand to make sure all the joints stay tight. Again, I'm just using firm pressure to hold the 2 pieces together while the glue cures. Next, we can add the completed rear tail section and bulkhead to the lower chassis piece, using the floor pan as a guide. Here you can see how the completed tail section fits tightly against the rear diffuser. The 2 molded in ridges keep it aligned. A little extra glue is added to make sure we've got a strong joint. We'll let this dry for a few minutes before we move on to the front end bars. Adding the front chassis bars is pretty straightforward. First locate it to the floor pan and then hit the 2 spots on the firewall with a touch of glue. You'll notice as I go along, my sequence doesn't necessarily follow the kit instructions. After building a few of these kits, I found a sequence that seems to work better for me. I like to tackle the rear section, then the front section, and then the middle section, and then add the remaining bars to the inside. Make sure both pieces are firmly attached to the firewall. With those 2 pieces in place, the lower bar can be added next. This simply just slots into place. With the back half finished and the front half finished, let's tackle the center section next. Since both the front and rear are held into place by the floor pan, the sidebars simply snap into place. Again, make sure everything is tight and square, and then hit it with some glue along the inside edges. Note that none of this is glued to the actual floor pan itself. It is still just being used as a jig to hold everything together. Now that the main structure is complete, we can lift it off the floor pan and check our progress. Up next, we'll tackle the top roll cage and all the support bars inside the driver's cockpit. A few of the straight kit pieces had a slight bow to them, so I'll replace those with some Evergreen 080 solid plastic rod. The 080 rod is a pretty close replacement for the size of the kit bars. Once the dash bar is in place, we'll replace the horizontal stiffener bar, using the kit piece as a guide. The roll cage top needs a bit of cleanup. Once again, we'll just use the hobby knife to scrape off the mold lines and get it ready to be glued in place. Another area I wanted to do differently after building a couple of these kits was to remove the molded in shifter linkage. This was difficult to paint after the car was assembled, so I'll remove it and replace it with some metal tubing. I remove the bulk of the material with the hobby knife and then clean it up with a sanding stick and a sanding pad. Working from right to left, now the roll cage top can be glued in place. Once the glue had finally cured on the roll cage top, the center post could be added next. Again, using the 080 rod, this was duplicated off the kit piece and then glued in place. With that stiffener bar in place, I also replaced the second dash bar. I'm going to go ahead and install the last two stiffener bars, but if you're building a car with a dash top, you'd probably want to leave these out or at least just add the top half of them. Getting a dash in with these already glued in place is quite difficult. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'll put them in their actual place. Before painting this chassis, I will remove the driver's side head bar to make it easier to get the seat and other interior details installed. Once the glue is cured, we can do one last test fit and see if it still fits our chassis pan. If we did everything right, it should drop right into place.